This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 459, featuring Adam Contos, leadership advisor, former CEO, and author of Start with a Win.
Welcome to the Leadership Podcast. Jim and Jan interview leaders who are blazing new trails. They'll read the bestsellers, they study trends, they'll provide thought leadership and the latest research when it comes to inspiring and leading others. They'll get you access to the great leaders of our time and help you learn from the very best. Now your hosts, Jim Vasilopoulos and Jan Rutherford.
Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vasilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us part of your day as we study leaders. And you can find all past episodes at theleadershippodcast.com.
And this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Darley. Darley's mission supports all our military and first responders with the equipment they need to ensure mission success, whether that's a water pump, a drone, or emergency medical supplies. Learn more about this fantastic company and the people supporting our nation's heroes at darley.com. DARLEY.com is where you can find them. And Darley's motto is fantastic. I really like this one. You serve others, we serve you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Our guest today is Adam Contos. This is an interesting bio. Former SWAT commander, then the CEO of RE/MAX, a current DU professor, DU being the University of Denver, a podcaster, actually a really great podcaster, a partner at Area 15 Ventures, and as Jim mentioned, author of Start with a Win, subtitle, Tools and Lessons to Create Personal and Business Success. Adam, welcome.
Hey, it's great to see you, Jan, and thanks for having me on, Jim.
Yeah, and Adam, we always ask at the very beginning, what's not in the public bio? What can't we find out about you doing a dumpster dive on the internet?
Wow, this is a fun one. Well, I worked undercover for a couple of years, so I was buying and selling drugs on the streets, legally, of course, and a fun history, little time in the Marine Corps, law enforcement background. You mentioned the SWAT team leader, and started my own companies. So entrepreneurial bug.
Hey, I want to ask you something. Maybe other people might be interested. Doing the undercover thing, what's the re-entry like, coming back from doing something like that?
It really wasn't much of a change for me. Not that I was living in that particular space, but working street level drugs, you sleep in your own bed every night. You definitely go places and change cars and things of that nature to make sure nobody's following you home. But the reality is, it was fun. It was like I was an actor. So
Wow.
that's kind of how I looked at it.
Yeah. Were there any times you thought, I can't believe I signed up for this because I'm about to pee my pants? I'm so scared. Were there any of those incidences?
We had, just in law enforcement in general, I've had several harrowing instances. But yeah, there were some interesting times when you're thinking, gosh, is there a camera someplace? Because it feels like I'm in a movie. It's very surreal what you're doing and who you're doing it with. But the reality is everything is very well rehearsed. Everything is briefed and debriefed. So ultimately it comes down to you're doing your job.
Yeah.
It was very straightforward.
Yeah.
Something Jan said a couple times on the show through the years is, I think to be a good leader today, you almost have to be a good actor. Like you have to have like that ability to kind of play a persona or project or really communicate your point, get your emotions with your message really aligned well. Looking back on, let's say, that early part of your career where you did some kind of undercover work and you said it, which is what made me think of it, like had to kind of be an actor. Do you think that experience really has helped you through the years going forward?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great point because ultimately we have to compartmentalize our feelings. And just as a leader, you might go into a meeting where you're being attacked for some particular reason, and you have to go into another meeting and you might have to sell your feelings or sell a particular opportunity to people, but you can't look back at that other one because it'll get you flustered so much that it keeps you from performing. And I heard it best put by Coach K. And Coach K, most winning men's basketball coach in history, he always said you're going to have a bad play. But ultimately, you have to look at your teammates and say, next play, and put that last play behind you and go to the next play with everything you've got to perform at your highest level. So absolutely, when it comes to that, you've got to be able to compartmentalize things. And it was the same thing when I ran a SWAT team too. come from a really bad call and go to another call, and you can't carry the last one into the next one. You've got to be able to compartmentalize those feelings.
Well, I'm going to compartmentalize the fact that you quoted a Duke coach because I hate Duke. But I do really appreciate Coach K and really enjoy his wisdom. And I think he's a fantastic guy, especially, some of the stuff he's done through the years. He's a remarkable coach. But yeah, boo Duke.
Oh, you just alienated a whole bunch of people in North Carolina, Jim. Great. Well, I wanted to kind of jump in. You wrote this great book, Start with a Win. In different ways, a lot of people that on our show to define leadership, define a high performing team, that kind of thing. I'm wondering if you can just start us off the defining, what's a win? What's a win in leadership?
This is a great question because ultimately, a win isn't a KPI. A win isn't completing a project. A win, more than anything, is just creating momentum. It's a step in the right direction. So, for instance, when you wake up in the morning, how do you start creating those forward momentums in your day, in your life? And how do you carry those things over into your business? So that's really what we're looking for here. We're looking for these, and you can even call them micro wins. Did I beat my alarm this morning? If your alarm's set for 5:30 and your eyes are open at 5:28, I look at that and I go, wow, that's a win. I beat my alarm. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm the guy who tries to beat the GPS in the car when it comes to getting places. But the reality is you're trying to build these little bitty steps forward in order to find success.
Let me ask you this, Adam. I have a friend, I don't want to steal his thunder. He's got a book coming out on momentum. And interesting, I've asked him, we talk about sports. A team's losing, and then all of a sudden something changes. The momentum changes, and this team starts winning, and then they pull it through. What do you think creates that shift in momentum for a team? Is it the leader? Is it something? I mean, what is it?
I think it's a combination of things. First of all, it's the emotional intelligence and emotional maturity of those players. To be able to compartmentalize the bad things from the good things and focus on those good things, the micro wins. Because we're going to have losses. But if we look at those losses as learnings instead of truly failures, then why can't we say, all right, we're not going to do that again? Or maybe we tried that play once, we ran the play once and they figured us out. Maybe we run it a little bit different next time in order to find a modification where we can be effective and victorious with that particular play. But ultimately, it comes down to a combination of, call it the culture that's built by the key leaders on the team or the coach of the team, who is the ultimate leader for the team. But everybody has to lead themselves through this in order to remove that doubt, that fear, doubt, uncertainty, overwhelm from your performance and focus on what you can do and going and doing it.
Yeah, I like the way you position that between there's a couple different lenses we look at this through, the self lens and the team lens. And I think that's important. And I think we always need to be mindful about the perspective we have as leaders. So much of the advice we hear on the internet, wherever on LinkedIn, whatever is about, individual level advice. One of the things I really like that you advocate for is starting the day with intentionality. Help us look at that through those two different lenses, like from a personal level and also from, let's say, a team or a leadership level, that intentionality that we have to have as leaders.
First of all, I would say successful leaders don't leave their day to chance. So you prime your mindset first, whether it's exercise, journaling, quiet reflection, whatever it might be, the start with a win concept we just talked about. And then the intentionality is setting clear priorities. What must happen today for progress to occur? And then leaders will communicate that, ensuring teams are aligned and engaged from the beginning. And then the leaders show up with clarity and energy. The teams are going to mirror that. If you walk into work in chaotic and reactive mindset, your team's going to follow suit. If you walk in and sit down at the table in a meeting and you're pounding your fist and cussing, things like that, guess what the employees are going to do? They're going to pound their fist and cuss at things when you're not in the room. So I would say great leadership starts before the first meeting. It's built in the moments of preparation and personal discipline, and that's how you create that intentionality.
Yeah. Is it incumbent upon us to set the left and right limits for people to just kind of say hey, I'm not necessarily going to set the priorities for you. I've got my priorities straight, but I need to give you your left and right limits for which you can determine your own priorities to achieve the goals you've been given. Cause I'm not going to show up every day and say, here are your goals for the day. but like here are the goals for the quarter, here are the goals for the month or the week, based on whatever periodicity we're managing on. And so as we kind of lay that out, like, is it laying out the left and right limits and the long-term goal and the short-term objectives, and then just letting people achieve those in their own way? Or do we have to go a step further and kind of help people learn how to be intentional, as you kind of suggested in some ways, just like showing up that way and having people say, okay, here's how it's done?
I think it's a combination. Obviously, when you start in an organization or you start leading a group, you're going to set those left and right limits. You're going to have a conversation of mutual expectations. Here's what I expect from you. Here's what you can expect from me. And I think that creates some of those boundaries. And really, what you're doing is you're building the value set moving forward as a leader in the organization and for that team. And people are going to start to go, okay, I'm going to run in this gray area a little bit that might be some of these limits, but ultimately the values and the team, as the team develops around those values, is going to bring people into the performance space that you're looking for. And as long as your values are clear and the expectations are clear and the conversation is there, I think it's safe to say that people will generally either fall in line or they're going to fall out of the team. And I don't believe in constantly reinforcing left and right limits. I think that starts to get into the management piece and eventually even micromanagement of what's going on, because now we're nitpicking it, or where are you stepping over the line here? Instead of giving guidance from a values-based perspective with the clarity of the communication from leadership, because people are going to accomplish tasks different ways. But if we're still accomplishing those tasks within our value set, what's wrong with that? I mean, we can all learn from each other and maybe it helps everybody get better.
Yeah. I love it.
Piggybacking on this, and maybe it's a little bit different direction, but in your book, Adam, you talk a lot about personal responsibility, which is one of the themes I always try to key in on with the leadership experts we speak to. What's your thoughts on creating that sort of personal responsibility without micromanaging? But there's this culture of accountability for oneself.
Right. Well, accountability isn't about policing, I guess. And this personal responsibility isn't about policing. It's not about micromanagement. I don't believe in micromanagement. I think you should allow people to spread their wings and fly as high and far and fast as they possibly can. And a great friend of mine has always said, we need to create an environment where people can be as successful as they want to be. But ultimately, we need to look at this and go, all right, this want factor, how successful do they want to be? And are they putting themselves in a box? I think that accountability piece and personal responsibility is about pulling ourselves out of our predetermined limitations that we have in our head and helping us excel. So we create this whole culture that we're talking about with, accountability and personal responsibility and things like that by modeling it ourselves as leaders, as setting clear expectations and being transparent, and then kind of coaching our teams alongside of us so that they don't look at what we're doing with them as micromanagement. They look at what we're doing with them as, hey, come on, let's do this together. But ultimately, it comes down to we have to have the guts as a leader to ask these powerful questions.
Yeah. There's a guest we had on the show a long time ago named Colleen Abdullah. She's out of Denver. She was the CEO of Wide Open West, really amazing leader. And I remember her saying to me a long time ago, Jan, I could ask you what you want to do, or I could ask you what should you do. And her point was some people have more tools around their tool belt than others, and that they have an obligation. That's kind of controversial in some ways. Because, what everybody wants to do is pursue their path and have their balance and all that stuff. How would you weigh in on that as a leader and seeing really high potential people and saying, hey, I know you don't want to take this next level of responsibility, but you can help a lot of people and you really should. What do you think?
And those are great questions. I mean, here's the reality. When's the last time you saw a leader say, here's our goal, and I would like to hear from my team or the team, what does success look like to you when it comes to achieving that goal? And what is your plan to achieve it? Let people troubleshoot this. We should always ask, what obstacles do you anticipate in accomplishing this? And how can I support you in doing that? It comes down to, I think traditionally under command and control environments, you and I are both used to command and control environments. We try to dictate how people pursue these successes, but ultimately in business, how do we find greater outcomes from our people? It's ultimately through us asking the right questions and empowering people to go find solutions and really outperform at that point.
Yeah. Such a great point about asking questions. That was the theme of the meeting I was at today. Hey, I know Jim's got to follow up, but before we go over there, just want to remind everybody about our sponsor, Darley, based in America's Midwest. They and their great people support first responders like you were, law enforcement like you were, the military like you were around the globe. So learn more at darley.com. That's darley.com.
Yeah, I think there are probably very few people who've had kind of the breadth of experiences you've had. You've had a lot of different things, different contexts entirely, and success in all of them, which is kind of amazing. And so you've dealt with high pressure situations that most of us can't imagine. You've also dealt with, business setbacks in an industry, in real estate, which are roller coaster. It's a roller coaster industry. It's not the most stable industry all the time. Tell us how you maintain a winning mindset in those kind of volatile environments. Because I think, regardless of what industry you're in right now, I mean, volatility is probably a guarantee right now.
It's interesting you say that because ultimately, volatility and setbacks have happened since the beginning of time. I don't care what industry, what culture, wherever you're at, you're going to have volatility. You're going to have setbacks. We just seem to find a new name for it as we move along, essentially in our either personal, professional careers, whatever it might be, whether or not it's a health issue or a divorce or a riff at work where we're laying people off or a crash in the economy or in our particular industry, they're going to happen. But ultimately, you have to understand they don't define you. Your response to them is what defines you. So I always remind myself, this is not the whole story of my life when one of these things happens. This is just a chapter. Great leaders really train themselves to see adversity as kind of a stepping stone and really not a stopping point in their career and their life. So we have to look at, okay, let's hold up the mirror. How am I going to respond to this situation? Because ultimately, it's not our reaction that is what's going to count here. It's our response, which is a calculated control, taking those inputs in and deciding what your outputs are going to be and being comfortable with moving forward at that point, even if you're in a chaotic situation. So, I mean, ultimately, it comes down to as a leader, people are going to look at you and they're going to mirror what you're doing. We all utilize mirror neurons to copy our leaders, essentially. You see that on the sports field, you see that in the military, you see that in business, but it's going to come down to what do we want to be defined by? We want to be defined by how we see ourselves and how we're viewed in our space by how we deal with this particular situation. So, setbacks will happen. It's cycles. They're all cycles, folks. And sure, you could say, was Blockbuster a cycle? Yeah, it was a cycle. It's going to happen. So, how do you learn from that last cycle and how do you move forward with the next one? With grace, with leadership, with emotional intelligence. That's how you should be defining yourself.
Well, you may have just touched on a bit of the answer in the next question I kind of want to ask, but you mentioned sports, and right now we're in this time frame where like we're about to hit the NFL draft. I'm always kind of fascinated by this because you've got a whole industry of people who are experts in this very narrow niche of human performance. You would think they should be able to say, this person who we've observed through hundreds of hours of game film and years of observation, that we think they're going to be a winner when they get into the big dance. And then they get there, and then some of them, at game speed or game conditions, like they just don't pan out. And so when we're looking for kind of leaders who can perform in volatility, because what we're looking for is, hey, we want to see how you operate under pressure, and kind of hard to predict. And we want to help everyone be better leaders. I mean, regardless of your skill level, but is there stuff that a guy like you looks for to say, like, here are the characteristics that really tell me someone's probably not going to freeze under pressure, that someone's going to perform and rise to the occasion and actually have the response we want?
I don't know that there are specific characteristics, but I think you can start putting pressures on people to see how they start to respond. And frankly, you can educate people. Leaders are made, they're not born. So we shouldn't just snatch somebody up and throw them out there and go, all right, let's put a whole bunch of stress on this person and then label them based on how they perform. Let's train them how to utilize the tools that they have as a human being and then build some stress and then some indoctrination, which, it's training is what we're doing here. So walking into the big game, the big dance, whatever it is, you don't ever want to see that rookie step on the field for the first time in the Super Bowl because they're going to fold. They're not going to have what it takes in order to be successful out there. They need to be working with that team, understanding that coach and their play philosophy, dealing with setbacks during the game. But ultimately, I would say it's up to us as leaders to create leaders, and that's our responsibility as leaders. And that is, you talk about the indoctrination, you talk about selecting the particular mindsets. I think if we are clear with our expectations of those people and say, I'm going to expose you to things that I've seen crush people, but I'm going to expose you to them because I want you to understand how to not let them crush you. If we're clear with that, great. I remember the first time I gave a public speech, it was in front of about 1,500 people. And my mentor, before I walked on stage, he goes, "Don't F it up." I was like, "Oh my gosh." I sat there for a second. I took a deep breath and I thought, first of all, none of these people are going to shoot me. Been through that in my life, getting shot at. There's nothing on fire. Nothing's exploding here. These are people that want to gain from what I'm doing. And this guy has already given me a whole bunch of training. He was just poking me a little bit there just to get me going and make me think about what can be. I crushed it. I had such a great time. And I came back and I said, teach me more. Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did right. Help me understand how to become the best I can possibly be at public speaking. It was fascinating because you talk about these tests. I think that was a test. He put me under pressure and he had seen me in SWAT situations and things of that nature before. He had been along and seen me in operation that way. And he knew that I could figure it out, but he wanted me to figure out the figuring out part.
Yeah. Well, I guess, what I'd take away from our dialogue is we want to look for people who are coachable and who want to learn and who will take the training that we have to offer and who will respond well to that mimicking type of, if we mimic the right behaviors, people kind of learn from that perhaps that's one of the things we always need to look for if we want to build that strong team. I mean, I agree. Anyone can be taught, but it's hard to teach someone who doesn't want to learn.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Humility definitely has got to be there.
Oh, you're talking about humility, and I always think about, gosh, you gotta have humility and you gotta balance that with confidence. One of the things that came up today was leaders need to spend more time with their people, but everybody wants to have less meetings. There's a lot of stuff out there that we're quote unquote supposed to do as leaders. When you look at all the things where there's a yin and a yang and we've got to balance things, what do you think for leaders is the most important thing to kind of keep in check, in balance?
Certainly the ego. Talking about the two big words here at play, confidence and humility. We don't want to outrun our ego ever. And people are going to have an ego to an extent, but they need to be aware of that ego. And I think that is the balance between confidence and humility. And if you have confidence without humility, it becomes arrogance. And that's when you get your butt kicked.
Do you think that's a sliding scale that, like, when you're a junior person, you've got to have a lot of swagger and confidence because you don't have a lot of other stuff. But as you get higher up, as you become a CEO, that you need to have a lot more humility. But maybe at different points in your career, it's okay for those to be out of whack.
Frankly, I think they're always going to be out of whack to an extent because we're always going to be testing the limits of those things.
Yeah.
You also have to read your audience for crying out loud. What are they looking for? If you're in a room of salespeople, you're probably going to lean a little more on the confidence side. But if you're in a room full of executives, you're probably going to lean a little more on the humility side. Or junior employees love humility, but they want to see a little bit of that spice of confidence thrown in there, some gravitas. I would say when everything comes down to probably this whole concept of emotional intelligence, awareness of yourself, awareness of the other person, and awareness of the business and how those three things mix together in order to create a concise message that accomplishes the tasks.
Yeah, and I think, to your point about emotional intelligence, I think the really hard part for most of us is not just awareness of others, but awareness of our effect on others. Because mostly we think about how everybody's affecting us. We don't often think about, I wonder what impact I had on the group just now. Are there ways that you coach that? You coach that whole ego, because you work with MBA students, you work with, lots of different people in different points in their career.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you look at executive presence overall, Executive presence is obviously you've got gravitas, you've got communication, and you have appearance. So, how do you show up? When you walk in the room, do people know, oh, that person's a leader? I've told a story before when I was in a room with a bunch of bankers, New York. It was an interesting event. Jamie Dimon was coming to speak, and Jamie Dimon walks in. Instantly, you knew he was there. He hadn't said anything, but you're like, wow, that guy's in charge. It's a combination of those things, and it's fascinating when you take a look at talking to, like, executive MBA students or MBA students, and 2 different categories of people there. Executive MBA students have executive experience. MBAs typically are just coming from their undergrad, and they're trying to figure out what does leadership look like and how do I implement the higher levels of strategy into my education. But ultimately, executive MBAs, some of them have executive presence. A lot of them are trying to figure it out, but it's difficult to get them to demonstrate that without kind of giving them this internal persona that makes you stand with your shoulders a little bit higher and a bigger smile and bright eyes and noticing people in the room. So ultimately, it comes down to these things can be taught. They are taught. And obviously, the next step out of that is communication. Communication, you have to know your audience. That's key. You don't walk into a room full of brand new employees and talk to them about succession planning because they have no idea what that is. You don't walk into the board of directors and talk to them about what's going on in the lunchroom, in the vending machine, or the latest interaction in the sales environment. They don't typically care about that. They want to hear about strategy and governance and what direction is the value of the organization going, things of that nature. It's a combination of those things. Know your audience, show up like a leader. I don't care where you're at, show up like a leader, look like you care and like you tried, and then deliver a message that resonates with your audience. I think you've got a combination of those things that works.
I'm going to kind of bring this a little bit full circle because you mentioned Coach K and you talk about Coach K. And one of it is he's a very wise man. He's got a lot of good advice, but he's put together a dynasty, or he put together one. I mean, it was a culture of winning. It was a lot of winning. Now, I think we're in the first day of the NCAA tournament right now, and I'm hoping Duke loses in the first round. And that's my sincere, I don't like Duke. Okay. But there's a reason we talk about Duke. The reason we talk about teams that are dynasties is because they sustain success. And, winning is something that is part of their culture and their DNA. What are the things that people need to think about that are different than the normal day to day tactician or quarter to quarter kind of tactician stuff that says, like, here's how we build that winning culture?
I think a lot of what you're talking about is success momentum. And the momentum of success, when you're winning and winning and winning, and maybe you lose once or twice, but you keep winning and you're learning every time you're winning and you figured out those little tweaks in order to win a little bit more or another time. But the reality is success breeds complacency if you let it. And the biggest mistake in leadership is assuming the momentum will sustain itself because it won't. It has to be continuously revitalized and readjusted and more effort from different directions, but very carefully because you don't want to screw up momentum either. You don't want to break something that's working well, but at the same time, you need to continue to adjust it because as soon as you do get complacent, new challenges will pop up that you're ignoring. So we need to continuously set new challenges, artificially, possibly, but we need to look for ways that we can the whole 1% better thing, regardless of how great you are, and then reinforce the behaviors that created the wins in the first place. A great example of this is Sir David Brailsford from Team Sky, the cycling team in Great Britain, and how they hadn't won anything from, I think it was like 1908. And then I think it was like 2008, they started winning gold medals and Tour de France and things like that. And it's just because this guy came in and figured out these little different things that created the success momentum. And then he continued to reinforce those and they got more momentum and more momentum. And they continued that because they didn't take their eye off the ball of the fact that they were trying to get better instead of just win. So the best teams just don't work for results. They work for a mission. And if that mission is continuously developing and improving, they're probably going to continue to win because they're continuing to revitalize that momentum.
Yeah. It's interesting. because one of the, let's say, dynasties I got to enjoy was Chicago Bulls. So I'm a big Chicago guy, loved the Bulls, no argument in my mind. Michael Jordan's the GOAT. Our good friend Don, who, wrote a book about him and stuff like that. When you hear interviews of him, what I find interesting is he dwells almost obsessively on the things that went wrong. He remembers with vivid detail, like, I didn't like losing that one game, or I didn't like missing that shot. I mean, he doesn't dwell on the victories, he dwells on some of the setbacks. And that obviously was part of what drove him to his maniacal commitment. Are there any setbacks that you've got, maybe a story that's just like super memorable that defined you?
Wow. First of all, yeah, kudos to Don Yeager. Just did an amazing job of uncovering Michael Jordan's success in writing. And by the way, Don is one of the few people to ever score on Michael Jordan in one-on-one
Yeah, we
basketball.
heard that story. Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, it's incredible. You gotta, if anybody ever runs into him, you gotta get him to tell you that story.
He will.
It's amazing. Oh yeah, definitely. We all face setbacks. I've burned out before, and you want to hit rock bottom in your business or your career. Wake up in the morning going, I hate what I do. I don't want to go do it. I'm going to fail today. Things of that nature. I've been there. The reality is we are all are going to face setbacks, but what we have to recognize as a leader is those setbacks occurring before they cause damage. And those setbacks, you can feel them in your heart. You can feel them with the frustration. Does your blood pressure go up? Are you not sleeping as well? Are your relationships struggling? Things of that nature. Yes, we're all going to have them. The reality is winning isn't an event, it's a culture, just like setbacks become a culture if you allow them. So we've got to continue to recognize when that happens. I've had injuries and I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, I have this period where I had no strength in my left arm because of a pinched nerve. And I'm going, what just happened? I'm supposed to be in athletic shape. I'm in really good shape. At this time, I'm exercising constantly and I can't pick up 5 pounds in my left hand. So what do? You break it down and analyze, why am I facing this setback? And you put emotion aside, write down the facts and say, how do I solve this problem? You troubleshoot it, figure it out, and then you make a plan to go fix it. And if you stick to your plan, you'll fix it. If you don't, you allow that to perpetually pull you down. And that's when we kind of find ourselves down in the dumps. And our employees are that way.
Adam, you mentioned Team Sky, and the leader of Team Sky was a guy named Bradley Wiggins, whose life has been a disaster in the last so many years. I mean, you saying all this makes me wonder. I mean, we talk a lot about, hey, here's how to be resilient. When you have failure, you pick yourself up and you learn. I wonder if part of it is also, do we know how to succeed? Do we know what to do when we've had some success? Because the news is littered with athletes and performers, and musicians, actors, people that have everything that literally fall apart. And we've seen it in the business world too. I wonder out loud if that's something that people don't know what to do with a win.
It's a great question. And I think the answer is we don't know what to do with a win when we get distracted by our losses. So if you think about what shows up great on the news, if you win something, you're kind of a very short story. If you lose at something or you start to have these continuous setbacks, hey, if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's what people are looking to latch onto because they always want to see somebody get drugged down from the top. They don't like seeing people at the top. We have this underdog mentality as human beings for some reason. And I think it's perpetuated by the news media, by our desire to see the little guy win or something like that. But the reality is the big guy started as a little guy at some point also. They just perpetually were able to ignore the losses that they were facing. And sure, people are going to throw stones at you. They're going to cast shade at whatever they can. But the reality is, first of all, set a culture, be a good person and live that culture. And if people like it, great. If they don't, great. But don't let them impact how you are going after your wins on your team. Ultimately, it's about not listening to the bad things that happen in your world. Turn on the news. There's tons of bad things that you could look at. Somebody doesn't like you right now, but don't allow that to drag you down. It's going to be for some stupid reason, probably. And it's not going to change how you go to bed tonight. So Don't let it change what your aspirations are, and set your goals and go after them by little bitty steps and make those wins.
Dan Pink's got a little short video clip out there basically saying 10% of your people should hate your guts.
There you go.
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen it, and by guys, I mean the audience, if you haven't seen this little video from Dan Pink, check it out. It's pretty good. But we're focused on Adam Contos. And Adam, as we wrap up today, and it's flown by, how would you summarize what you want to leave the group with? The main thought or question you want to put in the folks listening to this show in their mind?
I think we have to ask ourselves, what are you doing to create wins today? Let's focus on right now. Because if you're sitting there looking at, oh, I have this project, I got to pay my bills on Friday, whatever it is, the reality is we're going to be drugged down by looking at the things that are taking our time and not creating results. There are going to be a lot of time-sucking things in your life that don't create positive results. Great. Build them into your day. But don't forget about the things that create positive results. Create those wins. Focus on being better as a leader and focus on taking one more step towards your accomplishments. And if we look at life that way, that's how I get up in the morning. I'm like, what do I get to do today? Not what do I have to do today? It's a great way of really creating impact. Impact is not created like a big hammer blow. Impact is created these tiny little taps at a time. And that way you can help others. You can grow your leadership, learn something today, give it to somebody else, be a sponge. And that way we impact leadership better and the world's a better place. And if it's not a better place for somebody else, that's not your problem. Make it a better place for you and help those around you.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Yeah. And for our listeners, if you want to start with a win, read Start with a Win. It's a great book. We'll include ways for you to figure out how to get that book and how to connect up with Adam in our show notes. So make sure to visit us at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Sun Tzu.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rofke Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.